So this map, it's caused me a bit of a headache. Every so often when you're searching through some old maps, a little nugget of curiosity comes up and slaps you in the face. And before you know it, you're looking through some old books, you're looking through some more old maps and modern maps. That curiosity has turned into this wonderful rabbit hole, and it's now yours to dive and delve into. And that's exactly what has just happened here. So this one had something on it that bothered me so much that I thought, well, I'm going to visit this in person. This is the very gorgeous New Forest National Park, and we're kind of on the south coast of England. Now, if I show you a quick map of this particular part of the New Forest, this heathland here, right here, well, you can see there are no other features other than Elkham's grave. There's no roads, there's no crossroads, there's no bridleways, nothing else in the landscape other than this heathland. Every time I've come across one of these graves before, well, they're outside of a parish, they're on a crossroads, they're on a main route, they're on a parish boundary, and that's for very good reason. I'll come to that shortly. So why Elkham's grave? This is not what it seems. Let me explain why. Okay, this is what's referred to as a crossroad grave. It doesn't look like much, it's in the middle of nowhere, and it is a very old crossroad. The route used to join Newbury to Basingstoke used to come across here, but now it's just some old tracks, some old farm tracks in the middle of nowhere. And if we look at the 1880s maps, we see that route has moved a bit further north now, but our crossroad still remains with that old route. It actually crosses perpendicular to a Roman road, and that forms our crossroads. But if we zoom in a bit more, we see something else really curious: Sawyer's grave. Add to that, we're also on a parish boundary. Okay, so you might be thinking by this point, what exactly is a crossroad grave? So here's your context. Crossroad grave is that burial place of a particular type of criminal that had committed a crime against him or herself, positioned here away from the parish on the boundary, unable to move on. Okay, so this is the site of Sawyer's grave, and really frustratingly, the research on this comes to a dead end almost straight away. We just have word that this was a crossroad grave. We have no stories passed on, no folklore, absolutely nothing to give us any tangible sense of what happened here or to Sawyer, him or herself. So I guess now the big question is, well, how do we know this is a crossroad grave? We just have this random marking on a map. What exactly does all this mean? So we have a site that's just up ahead. So this route here I'm on now is an old sort of coaching road. I think it connected Salisbury with Devizes, and there's probably some old milestones along here, sort of 1700s. So a main road this was back in the day. And what I'm looking for just up ahead is something that crosses this perpendicular, a parish boundary. Now, unlike Sawyer's and Elkham's, where we have nothing marked on the modern OS maps, but if we flip back to the late 1800s and right up until the 1930s, well, we do have this one marked on those maps. This is Oram's grave. Now, it didn't take a huge amount of research to find out we have a man called James Oram who, on the 25th of July 1768, committed a crime which would end his life. We have a record of the Wiltshire coroner's bill suggesting what he charged for the 12-mile journey he made. Okay, so this is the very spot. This is a crossroads. We've got the main old coaching route going this way, right through where I'm standing. Perpendicular to this, we've got the parish boundary, the furthest point you could be outside of that parish on that crossroads. Now, this wasn't the last crossroad grave to be placed. Right here at this spot there are more records, so it seemed like it was quite a common practice, but we do have a bit of an issue with this. It would be over 100 years until we see the name Oram on the maps. The 1880s OS maps detail Oram, and when we look a bit closely, well, we find that Oram's grave that's right here on this very spot that we can evidence and we can see in actual records has now become confused on those 1880 maps with a prehistoric barrow. The barrow was presumably, I think, on top of that hill there, maybe 100, 200 yards away, while the practice of the crossroad graves here is now being conflated, completely tied up with something that happened in prehistory. They've become one. So on the travels, I'm often accused of not looking or taking folklore seriously enough, and I'm looking at the sort of the archaeological and the science. I brought with me today Jenna from the channel Cross and Coombe. Now, Jenna touches on folklore a bit more than I do. Is that fair to say?
I think that's probably fair to say.
And why could folklore be useful to us? Why do you enjoy it?
Well, I absolutely find folklore quite fascinating, because when you're reading the stories of folklore, now some of them are so completely off the wall and you kind of find yourself thinking, I'm not sure there's much truth in that, but some of them you think, you know what, is there a nugget of truth in this?
Yeah.
And it gets me excited, because then I want to try and find out what that truth is.
Yeah.
So I tend to use folklore as a way of bringing a place to life when I do a video.
So with that in mind, let's tackle Kit's grave. We have travelled to Martin Down in Hampshire, just southwest of Salisbury. Now if we start researching this, we come across some wonderful sites, and straight away we have some confusion about finding Kit's grave. In fact, the Modern Antiquarian website suggests that Kit's grave is Cottlesburgh or Cottlesburg, a barrow basically mentioned in an Anglo-Saxon charter. In fact, 2 Anglo-Saxon charters, and they locate that burg, that hill, that barrow as right here. There are indeed some extremely knowledgeable blogs which even themselves state that Kit's grave is in fact a very indistinct long barrow, so likely Neolithic or Bronze Age. So this, dear viewer, is a long barrow. This is not Kit's grave, and let me explain exactly why I think that is the case. So as Jenna and I walk this direction away from the long barrow, what I want to try and do is have a look at the evidence for that long barrow being a red herring. So first of all, if we have a look at the OS maps, well, we see something we absolutely love. We see 3 counties coming together on one point just up ahead of us. We also have parish boundaries, we have a border, and we have quite a significant routeway all to the west of that long barrow. We also then can flip to the early OS maps, the late 1800s, and we have a much better understanding of where Kit's grave was. Just take a look at this. Now Kit's grave is here, right on the crossroads, and the long barrow, well, that's way over here. And here is that crossroads. We've got a route that goes this way, sort of north-south-ish. We've got the point where 3 counties meet, Wiltshire, Hampshire and Dorset. And we've also got a parish boundary. As far as we're concerned, this is the spot of Kit's grave, not the long barrow just back there. But how exactly does this help us solve the Elkhams grave mystery? Okay, slight confession to make. I made a spreadsheet. So when I first started doing this research, I went through every single local crossroad grave I could find, because I wanted to see if they had anything in common. So I made this spreadsheet, detailed every aspect, what maps were they on, and the current ones, the old ones. And when I looked at some of the older maps, well, I found 2 really old ones on the 1759 Taylor's maps, and we have Woots and Moff's grave. We're talking 1759, the Taylor's maps, 1759, and here we are, Moff's grave. And if I flip to some others I've managed to print off, well, we've got Beavis and Woots on these really old maps, but that's it. They don't appear any later. On the 1880s maps, they're gone. On the modern maps, they're gone. And the problem we've got with these maps is, well, it's just planted right there. It could be within a 5-mile radius of the text on the map. Okay, so a little bit of research and we have something that might help. William Moff of Sherborne St John died 24th of August 1738, and we have a very tangible link there with a crossroad. It's on the very old map. So is this it? Is this the crime committed against oneself and the placement of the body on that crossroad grave? Job done. However, William Moff died an extremely wealthy man, worth over £30,000 in the 1700s. Now, here's a curious thing. He ordered his corpse to be laid in a grave about 6 feet deep in a public field, which he purchased near Rooksdown, and gave his tenant £50 that it should never be dug up or ploughed up again. So are we seeing maybe the 1880s OS maps with the traditional crossroad grave, and maybe these earlier ones, the 1759 ones, well, maybe those were for the rich and the famous? Well, that's what I thought until I found this. Now, this here details Moff and his demise, and it suggests that when he was found, well, he was found with no money, albeit his will left land. Well, he was soon to be said to be reliant on the parish to keep him going had he lived any longer. He was buried with no funeral service. Either way though, wow. How does this though sort of tie in and help us, more importantly, with Elkham's grave back in the New Forest? Now we're now, as I say, here in the heart of the New Forest trying to find Elkham's grave. No idea exactly what we're looking for as such. So I guess the question is, Jenna, how can folklore help us find what we're looking for? Because I'm often very quick to rule it out, and that's probably not a good trait of mine.
Well, the first thing would be to find out if there are any stories about what Elkham's grave is, and maybe that can help us understand what we're actually looking for. However, in this instance, we haven't really been able to find any stories at all. So in terms of being related to Crossroad graves, it's entirely possible that a long time ago there may well have been something of a crossroad in this area that has since disappeared, and maybe whoever put the early map completely missed it.
Yeah.
And when they then put the OS maps together, they spoke to the locals, and this name has existed in the folk memory of the people, even though that crossroad has since disappeared. So it might be that actually Elkham's grave is not here. It's somewhere else, and it's just been completely lost.
Now when we first came here we had no clue what we were looking for other than Elkham's on the map, but after all the other associations with the long barrows and the barrows, could this one be the same? Well, LiDAR gave us that clue. We just now seem to be associated with the barrow, and we're going to try and find that barrow right now.
We are going to try and find it.
Right, we think we're kind of at the right location here. In terms of, we've just looked on the LiDAR, and we found a big lump in the ground, and we think this is roughly where it is. Now, we've just had a bit of a look around in this area, and we can't find anything. It's on the LiDAR, and yet looking in these trees in front of us, I mean, if we have a look in this hedge here,
there's no mound at all.
There's no mound. Ugh. But either way, we can't seem to find. I mean, this is where you'd think, looking on the LiDAR, kind of right here, but we've just got like as flat as can possibly seen. It said on like megalithic portal it's raised a couple of feet off the ground, but absolutely nothing. We can't see any parish boundaries, we can't see any sort of routes that we know of. This Elkham's grave doesn't add up at the moment for us.
It's possible that, you know, if it did exist, if there was a Crossroad grave originally, that actually over time it's become associated with something prominent in the landscape, which may itself now have been has been disappearing. So now all we're left with is the name Elkham's grave, and no one seems to know. And a mystery. One of history's many mysteries, yeah.
So either way, the conclusion, because you lot love a conclusion and an opinion, well, I've got one on this for a change. So these were, as we know, graves of a particular type, a crossroad, a boundary, somewhere outside of the parish or the community. And in some cases, the name didn't always pass on to that particular spot, got translated into a feature on the landscape, a barrow, a long barrow, or in some cases like this one here, Elkham's, perhaps a whole chunk of the landscape, a hill. So I've been Paul, this has been Jenna. Jenna's doing a video on Crossroad graves too, but with a slightly different twist. Yes,
I'm actually going to be looking at the beliefs behind why people were buried at the crossroads, the superstitions, some of the stories, and I'm also going to be visiting a few other locations, well, probably 2 locations,
cool,
that are quite famous actually in the UK. So
brilliant. Right, go subscribe to Jenna's channel, link here, link below, link in the pinned comment, etc. See you this time next week.